Hello and welcome to a tutorial for picking up the stitches in Nathan's hat. This is the Gnot Just Another Gnome pattern from Imagine Landscapes, and for this stage in the gnome we need to be picking up these stitches. We've marked them off with contrasting yarn because we really want to make this an easy process with both knits and purls, and having increased right at the base here before one of the very first cabling, it gets a little tricky to do it by eye. So that's why we left ourselves a visual trail. So I know that this is where I started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this over, and what was knits on this side will be purls on this side. So we're going to start right there. And now we are going to look in here and try to figure out how we're going to do this. So when I look at this yarn, I see sort of roughly where I should be, and I see that yarn going here, and then it travels through to here. All right, so now we know what we're doing. So we're going to pick up right there, and we're going to travel following around. Here it's really nice and easy. For instance, we're going to just follow the path of the yarn so it can help to have good light. If you have even smaller needles than you use to knit the hat, it can be great to use those. It doesn't matter what size needle you pick up the stitches with, because we're not picking up and knitting. We're just going to pick them up for stage one. All right, so I've pulled that back out again on myself. Now let's peek in here. So what I'm doing is I'm using the needle tip to kind of pull things apart and explore. Because that cabling happened, it can tighten things up and make it a little harder to see. So don't hesitate to sort of use a fingernail or something else to kind of pull stitches apart and to get that. And this makes sense to me. Look, I've got 3 stitches here before we switch to another, from the purl side to the knit side here. And that makes sense to me because we had 3 knit stitches when we started the ribbing, and we have 2 purl stitches here. So it'll be opposite on this side. So the fact that I have 3 here makes sense. And then I would have 1, 2, again, that makes sense. And so we're just going to keep following around, following that path that the knitting or the yarn takes. So there are 2 things to note when we get to the end of our stitch, of our picking up round. And one of them is how to rearrange the stitches so that we have the right position to start our round. And the other is how to not start knitting inside out, which is a fairly common thing that happens at this stage. And by fairly common, I just mean that it's a question I get. All right, so step 1 would be to count all these stitches and make sure you have 48 stitches and that you have the right number. Step 2 says that we need to rearrange the last 3 stitches we picked up. Now, when we knit this hat, we were knitting this way, and we started with the cable, knit across, started with the cable, and knit across. But in the hat, because of course we picked up and we went this way, we need these 3 stitches for the body to be on the beginning of the needle. What we're going to try to do for the body is we've got a cable that's going to line up with this cable. And if we just start cabling with these 3 stitches, that's not going to line up. So these 3 stitches need to move over here. I'm going to use a 4th needle so that I don't try to fold that and make it a little tricky. I think the angle's just a little harder, so we will. First, we're going to move these 3 stitches so that they are on the beginning of what will be needle 1. There we go. So I've just transferred them over to what I'm calling my needle 1. All right, a couple of things. So we've moved those stitches so that this can be the first 3 stitches, which will be another cable. I recommend for those of you who are knitting on DPNs to make the kind of the right side, not the first needle, but the second panel. And what this is going to mean is that a lot of people struggle with ladders in purling, and there is going to be some purling between the cables on this first step of the body. So If, because of what we're going to do later in the pattern, I'm going to suggest that the panel you knit the first, you think of as the back, and that you have your needle, your stitches split so that there's sort of a division sort of roughly in the middle. And then I'm going to suggest that from here over, all be on one needle so that you don't have any gap or any laddering in that center bit. Those of you who are working on magic loop or 2 circulars at the same time, you don't have to worry about this. This 2-panel gnome is actually really well designed to be worked on those 2 methods. But obviously we have to give tips for both styles or all styles of needle knitting. All right, so I've rearranged this so that for DPN knitting, I've got the first panel split over 2 needles and the second panel split over 1. All right, so now it's time to remove the contrasting yarn. Just pull that out across the needle as you go. Depending on how tight everything is, you may find it a little something you have to kind of work across, or you might be able to just pull on one end and yank it all out in one go. I am not able to do that. I picked a pretty plump fingering weight yarn because I wanted you guys to be able to, this color is just such a fabulous contrast to this pretty seafoam green from Marinated Yarns. All right, so I've removed that contrasting yarn, and now we're going to switch to color 2 and we are going to start knitting. And it is important to remember not to start knitting at the back of the yarn or the triangle, even though this is where we sort of started working and then we picked up in this direction. When you pick up and knit, think about the fact that you need to have the stitches that reveal the front of the hat facing you. If you start knitting on this, which is the back of the inside of the hat, you're going to produce a gnome that's inside out on the body. So if you are picking up to knit in the round and you're wondering, oh, how do I remember this? If you can look down from the needle you're about to work and you see the side of the hat that you want, or the side of the whatever that you want to see on the outside, then you're doing the right thing. So now all you need to do is grab your body color. I hope that this tutorial helps. I'll see you in the next stage of Knitting Nathan. Happy knitting and happy gnoming.